Hey everyone, welcome to our Soul Footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. We're on the series of videos of the food prep and planning and meal prep and preservation and all that post the 6 weekly-ish grocery haul. I think this is part 3, though I always get mixed up and I forget to put it on my notes as to which part I'm up to, but I'm pretty sure this is part 3. I'm a little bit behind, I know. I say that and everyone says don't worry about it, but I set myself a little bit of a schedule and I try and stick to it, and then I don't, and then I get frustrated at myself. But I haven't had a video out in a few days. Part of it is the weather. You should be able to hear the rain, I'd imagine, on the solar panels above me. So the temperature has dropped quite drastically. I think it's about 15, 16 at the moment, which is really pleasant. It means I'm in long sleeves, but with my nerve pain condition, the change of weather can cause some issues, so I've had to bump some meds and it doesn't leave me feeling great. But also the new buildings still aren't done, and we were supposed to spend this weekend putting walls up on the second one because my cousin's coming next week to help us get the roofing on, except that it has rained all day, and working with metal panels in the rain is not a great idea. We would just end up injuring ourselves, and it's just hasn't happened. So hopefully it clears up and we get those walls up before he comes out on Easter weekend, so that we can just use his time here to do the stuff that we just cannot do on our own, because we should be able to get the walls up on our own. We just haven't. Daryl got some glass stuck in his foot that we were using drawing ointment and stuff to try and get out, but there's a piece that's gone too deep. He had to go and get an x-ray, and they saw it on the x-ray, so I'll probably have to get it surgically removed at some point and things like that. So there's been a bit of a delay in getting some physical stuff done with that, but also the whole losing the job and stuff means that we've pivoted a little bit on our workload and trying to figure out what's going to work best for both of us to do in the portions of stuff, and it's all just been a little bit messy for this, you know, period of time, and I just haven't got out here to do the voiceover, so I've come out in the rain to do it now. But this roof isn't a sealed roof, it's just solar panels on a structure, which means that there's leak points through the middle of where they all sit, because we haven't got them joined, because there has to be movement in them, so they're on rails, snug but not joined, so there is leak points everywhere out here, but there just isn't anywhere else to do it until we get those buildings finished, and we can't get the buildings finished at the moment. So it's all just a little bit out of my control at the moment, and that's not my forte, having these things that I would really like to get done or really like to be finished and not actually being able to do it because it's just not within the ability to do it. So otherwise, let's get back to the food. So I think this is part 3. I can't remember what date this is. I think the last one was like 9th, 10th, 11th, so this is probably 12th, 13th, 14th or something like that. It's the next few days of the food prep. So I've got my notes written down here, and I've had to hand write them all out because our printer ran out of ink and I didn't realise. So I have ordered more ink for the printer. That's another thing that's driving us mental at the moment. We have everything just so crammed into space that it's really hard to keep track of things. I'm so looking forward to being able to spread out. This is like this fact that we had the buildings start going up and then we've had to stop and had all this time with the money's already spent, the buildings are sitting there and we can't do anything with it, is driving me nuts. But hopefully by the end of Easter weekend we'll have it all done. And I might put some videos a little bit out of order this week too, because I've been making a whole bunch of hot cross buns. I'll put a photo here, but I put some up on Facebook, and I've got a few different flavors that I want to try, so I might put a video together of all the different hot cross buns in the lead up to Easter, being that it's, you know, an Easter. Though I do call them not cross buns because I don't put a cross on them, just because I couldn't be bothered. I'm not religious at all, so we use hot cross buns purely because it's an Easter thing and I really like them. So I don't have any particular attachment to Easter in a religious sense. Daryl and will go to church and take the kids and stuff, but I don't do anything. So the hot cross buns are purely just because I really like hot cross buns, so I don't bother with the crosses or anything. So anyway, let's get the voiceover done for this patch of food. We did pineapple in jars, we did pineapple cordial, we preserved some bananas, all sorts of things, so we'll get to it. This month we didn't get a box of Cavendish bananas. We got lots of little punnets of ladyfinger bananas, which are a smaller banana, and they tend to go black on the outside but not on the inside as quickly. I don't know exactly how it works, but they tend to hold their texture better for longer. So we basically have left them in the punnets on the table, and the kids have helped themselves to them throughout the time that we've been home. I did do some baking with them, but what I've just been doing is, as some get really dark colored, I put them on trays and put them in the freezer. So we just put like a tray or two in the freezer every few days of the ones that are looking more ripe than others. And so we just flash freeze them on the trays, so that when they go in the freezer, they get flash frozen, and then after they're solid, we put them in Ziploc bags, and that way they don't stick to each other as badly, because we tend to use these for smoothies or baking and things like that, though the kids will just go in and grab half a banana and eat it frozen. They're more than happy to do that. So it's better if they're not all stuck together. Kavik helped me with these, though he was a little bit more pedantic about how they had to be laid out on the trays than I was, which is fine, but he helped, and I just let him go. Just let him fill the trays up with those bananas, and we just filled 2 trays of them to get them in the freezer. He helped out a fair bit in the kitchen that particular day. He decided that it was a day to spend with Mum in the kitchen for some reason, which is fine. I then worked up the pineapples. We did eat one of them fresh within the first day or whatever that we got home. I must have accidentally put a hole in the skin of one, so there was a spot that was going yuck, so we cut that out and we just ate that particular one fresh. But we tend to like to use the pineapples for pizza and freezing for other things. So I went through the rest of the pineapples. So I think I bought 6 large pineapples, so it must be 5 left. And I took the skin off all of them. Now, I'm not fussy about skin. I take the skin off with a bit of flesh because we're going to use that skin, so it doesn't worry me if I end up with a bit of flesh taken off with the skin. So I peel them all and then dice up the pineapple into pieces and put the cores and the skins in another bowl. Now, I did clean these with a bit of bicarb and a scourer. There's mixed opinions on using the peels on these, but for me, I'm not concerned. Anyway, we have tried the faux pineapple, which is the zucchini. We did some tromboncino done in pineapple juice in jars as well to use for pizza toppings, but no one was particularly enamored of it. It worked really well. The zucchini turned into like this, the texture was very similar to pineapple, and the flavor wasn't too bad. It's just that because you use like pineapple juice that you buy from a shop, for a start it ends up quite expensive, but also it had that fake flavor to it because the pineapple juice just doesn't taste real. So when you're canning the pineapple, the zucchini in the pineapple juice, it tastes like the pineapple juice and just doesn't taste quite right. So we don't tend to do that. So we tend to just use whatever pineapples we get. We tend to get enough throughout the year that I can make enough jars for pizza. So Kavik was helping with the pineapple. I think he just wanted to be able to eat as much pineapple as he could, though I do have to curb them a little bit with the pineapple or the kids end up with sore mouths. So they have to be aware that they can't just gorge on raw pineapple. The skins and cores go into the Thermomix to be ground up. There's more surface area, the more flavour you're going to get out of them. As I said, we wiped them down with a bit of bicarb and a scourer. Pineapples are apparently one of the highest sprayed fruits. Every time I do something with the skin, someone brings it up. So there is apparently a lot of chemicals on the skins of a pineapple. It doesn't really get through to the fruit very much because the skin's quite thick, but apparently these skins hold it. Now, this becomes completely personal choice as to whether you are comfortable using the skins or not. I don't have a problem with it, so we tend to use them. So if you grind the cores and the peels up using a food processor, I use my Thermomix, then you'll get more out of it because the more surface area, the better for getting things out of it. I put the pieces that I cubed up in jars. As I said, these are for pizza, so I'm not overly concerned. These 300ml jars will be enough. Darryl and I do not like pineapple in our pizza, so it's only the 6 kids who have pineapple in the pizza, and I just split a jar between the 6 of them, and they get, you know, 4 or 5 pieces per child on the pizza, and it's plenty. I put a teaspoon of sugar in with each jar of pineapple pieces, and then I just top them up with water. Now, some people make a syrup up using the cores and stuff to put in the jars. I'm using the cores to make cordial, so I'm not going to, I'm going to say waste, but it's not really waste, that syrup putting in the jars. It does make its own juice, but I found the first couple of times I did it with just water, and I found that the pineapple pieces themselves ended up a little bit insipid, a little bit bland, because they had released all their flavour into the water. So what I did was add a teaspoon of sugar in before I chop it up with water, and that seems to fix it. It seems to mean that the pineapple holds its flavour well enough. The kids still fight over the pineapple juice that comes out of the jar, which is just, you know, the water that the pineapple's cooked in, and it tastes similar to the stuff you buy in the shop, though that stuff's done in syrup. It's a lot sweeter and a lot stronger, but we're so used to doing things with less sugar that this works for us. Kavik helped me pack the jars nice and firm, so we want to push that fruit in there nice and firm because it will shrink as it cooks, so we want it below the rim of the jar, but we do want it decently packed in those jars. I ended up filling 20 jars with it and then decided to freeze the rest. So all we did was tip the rest of it out onto a baking paper on a tray and flash freeze it, and then that'll go in Ziploc bags. The kids, most of this will probably just get eaten straight out of the freezer. I'd like to think that I could make some like pineapple pina colada type pina colada type ice blocks and stuff out of it, but it probably, by the time I go back to use it, it'll probably all be gone. They just go and grab a handful out of the freezer and eat it. As I said, I top all the jars with water, so I put that teaspoon of sugar in every jar and then I top it all with water. I clean the rims with white vinegar and then the lids go on nice and tight. I wasn't sure how I was going to process this many jars efficiently, so I started by steam canning a batch. So I have a steam canner, I put the jars in there. You can only fit a certain amount of jars in there though, and I don't have a rack that fits so that I could stack them in there either, so I only have a single layer of jars, and I steam can that batch. But I then ended up putting the rest of them in the pressure canner to steam can because the steam canner is a whole lot quicker. But the jars are cold, so between batches I would have to cool the steam canner and put fresh cold water in it to then start it. I couldn't start it that hot again, so I thought that the time and the wastage of water and that wouldn't work real well, so I ended up doing the rest in the pressure cooker as a steam canner, so that I could do them all at once. Now, I wouldn't have fit all 20 jars in the 3 layers in the pressure canner, so by doing that one load in the steam canner, it meant that I fit the rest of the jars into the pressure canner to steam it in there anyway. And I did 3 layers still, but just the rest of the jars. Now with the steam canner, just to mention it, it has a little dial on the top which is color coded. For my altitude, you have to use it has to get to the dark green. So once the little dial gets to the dark green, I covered the pineapple pulp generously with water. This is based on the Sally Wise recipe, but she only puts a minimal amount of water in it. But I like to stretch this out as much as possible, so I put quite a significant amount of water, covered the pulp in the water. I also added a couple of whole peeled limes and some zest, and started it heating to a simmer. While the steam canner was going and the cordial was simmering, I worked on some of the limes. So I used a potato peeler for the zest that takes the green zest off without the pith, and then I cut all the pith off the actual flesh of the lime, keeping the flesh separate as well. So we're going to discard the pith, we're going to keep the green zest, and we're going to keep the lime flesh. I just went through a whole bunch of them while I had time to do them. I also remembered that I had a couple of pomelos left and thought that they might add something to the flavour and colour of the cordial. Now, we got these with a hamper and no one was hugely enamoured of them. They tried them, but they're very dry flesh on them, and I was going to turn them into a jam and I just didn't get around to it. I've now actually run out of my low methyl ester pectin, so I've got some on the way, so I can't do a jam at the moment. I could have frozen it and made it as jam later or whatever, but anyway, I thought that a couple of the pomelos would be good in the pineapple cordial because they're kind of a red colour, so they might add a little bit of a citrus flavour but also a little bit of colour to them. So I just peeled them and put only the flesh into the pot with everything else. Once the cordial had simmered for a while, I turned it off and I let it steep. So this will steep for a couple of hours overnight. It really depends on what I've got on. I'll stick the pot in the fridge if I need to, if I'm not going to get to it in the same day. But I like to leave all of that stuff in there to steep for as long as possible. Obviously not overly long because it'll start fermenting. The next day, I strained that pulp. Now, the pulp for the pineapple scrap cordial is a hard one. You want as much as possible from it, but it's not easy to strain. So I did a couple of passes. The first pass, I pressed it through a metal colander, and then the second pass I used a jelly bag. So last time I made it I used flour sack tea towels, which worked wonderfully because they're really large, which let me put a whole bunch in there. I could use the torsion of the twist to squeeze the cordial out and things like that, but I couldn't find any to use this time. The problem with tea towels in my current kitchen setup and things like that is that they go missing, or they get repurposed for something else, or I only have this small drawer that the tea towels go into, and so sometimes that drawer gets full and they get put elsewhere and I can't find them. I actually have added some to my shopping list on Amazon because I'm going to buy myself some more, but until we've got the kitchen situation sorted out, then it's just tea towels tend to go missing in my kitchen. It's driving me nuts. But anyway, so I didn't have one there to use, so I just used a jelly strainer bag to do it instead. Once I squeezed it out, I then put it one last time through a fine colander into the pan just to get a bit of any extra larger bits of pulp through it. Added some sugar and some tartaric acid. The tartaric acid is to hinder fermentation. I brought it up to a low simmer to dissolve that sugar well. You want the sugar dissolved really well, because if there's any crystals of sugar left in it when you have it on the shelf, there is potential for that to create more crystals and then crystallize on the shelf, and you don't want that. So you want to dissolve the sugar well, but on a low heat. We don't want it to boil. While that was simmering, melting, dissolving the sugar and things like that, I made tortillas for lunch. I have a snippet of it here, so I thought I'd share. This was my standard flatbread recipe, which is the next thing I'm aiming to share, actually. I'm hoping to get a PDF up on Patreon today so that some people on there can test it for me. I've had a couple of people testing it outside of the channel, but if a couple more people could try it and make sure it works, that would be ideal. So I took some progress photos so I can show people what the dough looks like at different stages, and I'll write that out and I'll put that up on Patreon hopefully by tonight, or like when this video comes out or whatever. I filled my standard passata bottles, which I really like. These are the muddy ones. I like the really narrow mouth on them. With the cordial, cleaned the rims with white vinegar and put lids on nice and tight. Lug lid jars or supermarket jars or whatever you want to call them. You need to put the lids on nice and firm before processing them. I then warmed up 3 quarts of water in the bottom of the canner because the cordial is warm in warm jars, so we want the water in the canner to be warm. I placed them in there and I used the pressure canner as a steam canner again. Again, the lid goes on once the valve pops up to say that the canner is under pressure, full of steam, then I start timing. Once they were processed, I pulled them out to rest for 24 hours. You can see the sediment in the bottom here from the aggressive squeezing that I did, the pushing through the colander and the aggressive squeezing through the jelly bag. If you don't want sediment or matter in your stocks and your cordials and things like that, you need to not squeeze them, basically. So you need to allow them to gravity drip through a fine colander or mesh or whatever else, and that way all the solids will stay behind. But we're not overly concerned. I don't like too much texture in the cordial because it ends up heavier than the soda water and ends up sitting on the bottom and you lose some of the flavor. But I don't mind a little bit. So we are fairly aggressive with our squeezing and pressing and things like that, but we also tend to filter it a couple of different ways as well to minimize it as much as possible, and make sure to shake it before we add it to the soda water as well, or water if you're just having it with water. The next task was to get all the chicken thighs sorted, so I first sliced them into strips. I find this is the best way for us. It keeps them still nice and moist but reduces the cooking time. It's less time consuming than like flattening the thighs out, and you lose a little bit of texture when you flatten them out as well, and leaves them a good size and texture and all the rest of it for a whole bunch of uses. So I just cut them into thin strips off the thighs, and then I sort them out how I want them. So we prefer to cook the thighs. We prefer to store them cooked most of the time. Most of the meals that I make that use these thighs, it's easy enough to just warm them up and throw them in rather than having to cook them, because if I want to cook them I need to defrost them to cook them, whereas if it's a pre-cooked meat I can half defrost them and then heat them up and it's fine. So it just makes it a little bit easier. The first big bowlful I did a simple garlic, ginger and soy marinade. I use this in a few ways, big one being dredged in potato starch, fried and served with lemon chung, which I'll do for dinner tonight, so you'll see later on in the video. But it's also nice just as a marinated chicken for a variety of different meals. This is one that I do freeze raw, because if I'm doing the dredging in potato starch then it needs to be raw to do that with. So this is one marinade that I do freeze raw. While slicing all the chicken, Darryl was actually oiling the new vacuum sealer. I couldn't find this footage the other day when I did the video about the vacuum sealer, so I'm just going to toss it in here. This is what it looks like opened up at the back and the oil reservoir placement. So the compressor does require oil, and Darryl had to fill the oil reservoir before we used it. We did check it after we'd done it, and the oil volume basically hasn't moved. So it doesn't need to be done very often, but this does need to be done especially initially. Once I'd cut up the rest of the chicken, I split it into containers. Now we're right on dusk here, and I don't know if it's the same elsewhere, but on dusk here we get inundated with flies just before they all go to bed. So there is flies everywhere. We've got raw chicken going and it's dusk and it's horrible, but we need to keep lids on everything as much as possible, but I probably won't be able to edit out all the flies. So just as a bit of a notation there, but I have containers with lids so that I can keep the lids on things. I seasoned 2 containers the standard way that I do, which is with cowboy candy and smoked paprika and garlic and onion, mustard powder, salt and pepper, all the basic flavors that we really like, a little bit of oil in there, and just massaged into the meat so that it's all well coated. I did the third one with a buttermilk marinade, except I use milk kefir. So you could use, and standard, most of the recipes use buttermilk. Milk kefir is similar sort of thing. You're looking for a sour dairy product, I suppose. So I put milk kefir in the container, also a few spices, some garlic, some smoked paprika, a bit of onion, salt and pepper, things like that, into the marinade as well, and put the chicken in there too. I will put the lids on these and they will go into the fridge overnight, and I will deal with the rest of the process of it tomorrow. For dinner, I dredged some of that soy, ginger, garlic chicken in the seasoned potato starch. So again, it's potato starch, not potato flour, and it has some spices mixed through it, salt, pepper, smoked paprika, garlic, all the standard type stuff, very similar to anything else that I tend to do, all my basic flavors. Even though my food doesn't taste the same from dish to dish, I do use the same base flavors for most things, and part of that is because I buy those base flavors in bulk. But anyway, so I dredge them in that potato starch with that seasoning on it, and then I fry them off in a couple of inches of vegetable oil. So this ends up a beautiful crispy coating, but none of the weight of a batter. It's not a batter. You're not egging it. You're not using any sort of wet batter. You're purely dredging that marinated chicken in the potato starch. So it ends up really, really crispy, but really light. It's lovely. I made some basic steamed rice, and I sauteed a bunch of the broccoli and zucchini in a pan, and we just drizzled it with lemon chung. Now, lemon chung I make again in the next couple of days, so I will show it on video. But it is a Korean lemon syrup, basically, and it is whole lemons with the seeds taken out, sliced, put in jars and layered with sugar, and as the lemon juice mixes with the sugar, it turns into a syrup. So I will make it again. I did make it again in the next couple of days, so you will see it on a video coming up, but it's a really lovely lemon sauce, similar to when you buy lemon chicken from a Chinese store. So it's just really tasty, and that crunchy chicken with that drizzle of lemon is it's really, really nice. And then we had to use more of that broccoli and zucchini, so the whole point was to use lots of that veggie as well with that rice. We don't make fried chicken very often. When I do make it, I tend to make it in bulk and then freeze it like the buttermilk chicken, but this potato starch dredged one, it's not it's not really one that I'd reheat. It's one that you need to make fresh. So we do put that chicken raw in the freezer for that purpose, because we like to make this dish every now and again, and that lemon chung works really well with that, especially with a nice steamed rice and green veg. We do use steamed veg with it sometimes, like frozen veg as well, but it's really nice at the beginning of the month with that fresh veggies. So there's a couple of meals that I always make near the beginning of the month because I like it with the fresh veggies. This is one of them. Green chicken curry is a similar sort of one. I much prefer it with the fresh green veggies than with the steamed ones, but you know, it is what it is. So that was another few days of food prep for March after the last grocery haul, and I will try and get the next one done in the next couple of days and get it to you as well. So thank you for joining me again, and I will see you on the next video. Bye guys.